I remember the exact moment my life ended. It wasn't when the handcuffs clicked around my wrists. It wasn't when they read me my rights in front of my neighbors. It wasn't even when the judge said guilty and I felt my knees buckle. It was 3 months into my sentence at Riverbend State Prison when I was standing in the chow line, and a guard called me by my number instead of my name. Inmate 847,293. That's when I realized I wasn't a person anymore. I was just a number in a system that didn't care if I was innocent or guilty. And I would spend the next 10 years of my life trying to prove something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I didn't commit the crime they said I did. But in America, being innocent doesn't always mean you're free. This is the story of how the justice system destroyed my life, took everything I'd built, and left me with scars that will never fully heal. This is my story of wrongful conviction. March 15th, 2008. That's the date burned into my memory like a brand. I was 29 years old. I had a decent job as an assistant manager at a regional electronics store in Columbus, Ohio. I had an apartment I was proud of, a girlfriend I was planning to propose to, and a life that wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I worked 45 hours a week, paid my taxes, coached youth basketball on weekends. I was just normal. The Thursday started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, showered, grabbed coffee at the gas station on my way to work. I opened the store at 9, handled a shipment of laptops, dealt with a customer complaint about a defective phone. Ordinary, forgettable. I got home around 7 that evening. I was heating up leftover pizza when I heard the knock. Not a normal knock, the kind that makes your stomach drop even before you know why. I opened the door to find 4 police officers, hands on their belts, faces set in that blank expression cops get when they're about to ruin your day. Marcus Williams, the lead officer asked, though he already knew. Yeah, that's me. What's this about? You need to come with us. You're under arrest for armed robbery and aggravated assault. The words didn't make sense. They were English, but they might as well have been another language. Armed robbery, assault. I'd never even been in a fight since middle school. There must be some mistake, I said. I didn't rob anyone. You can explain that downtown. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. I complied because what else do you do? My hands were shaking as the cuffs tightened. My neighbors were coming out onto their porches. Mrs. Chun from upstairs had her phone out, recording. The humiliation hit me before the fear did. They put me in the back of a cruiser. No seatbelt, just metal and plastic and the smell of old sweat and anxiety. I kept waiting for someone to laugh, to say this was a prank or a misunderstanding. Nobody laughed. At the station, they processed me like I was cattle. Fingerprints, mugshot, empty your pockets, sign here. I kept asking what I was being charged with, what evidence they had. They told me a lawyer would explain everything. I spent the night in a holding cell with 7 other men. Some were passed out. Some were muttering to themselves. One guy kept laughing at nothing. I sat on a metal bench and tried to make sense of what was happening. The robbery, they finally told me the next morning, had happened 3 days earlier. Monday night, March 12th, a convenience store on the east side of Columbus. A man in a black hoodie had walked in around PM, pulled a gun, demanded cash from the register, and pistol whipped a clerk. When he moved too slowly, the clock needed 12 stitches. The robber got away with $436. And somehow, they decided that robber was me. Before I go further, you need to understand something about the American justice system that I didn't know back then. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, there have been more than 3,200 exonerations in the United States since 1989. That's 3,200 people who were convicted of crimes they didn't commit and later proven innocent. And those are just the ones we know about, the ones who had the resources, the evidence, or the sheer luck to prove their innocence. The Innocence Project estimates that between 2% and 10% of all prisoners in America are actually innocent. If you take the lower estimate, that's still about 40,000 innocent people sitting in cells right now. The average wrongful conviction case takes over 14 years to overturn. 14 years of an innocent person's life gone. Some people die in prison before they can be exonerated. Some give up fighting and just accept their fate. Black Americans are 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of serious crimes than white Americans. I'm a black man in America. Those odds were never in my favor. But back in that holding cell in March 2008, I didn't know any of this. I still believed that innocence was enough. I still had faith in the system. That faith wouldn't last long. My arraignment was on a Friday morning. I was assigned a public defender named Richard Costner. He was in his 50s, wore a suit that had seen better days, and carried a briefcase stuffed with manila folders. He had 12 minutes to talk to me before we went before the judge. "Okay, Marcus," he said, flipping through papers. "They've got you on armed robbery and aggravated assault. Here's what they're working with. Eyewitness identification from the store clerk, surveillance footage, and you match the general description." "I didn't do it," I said. "I wasn't even near that store. I was at home that night watching TV. Can anyone confirm that?" "My girlfriend. She was with me until about 9:30, and after 9:30, I was alone. But the robbery happened at 10. I was at home." He wrote something down, not looking convinced. "The clerk identified you from a photo lineup. He was pretty certain. He's wrong. It wasn't me." Costa closed the folder. "Look, Marcus, I believe you. Or at least, I want to. But eyewitness testimony is powerful. Juries trust it. And the surveillance footage, even though it's grainy, shows someone who could be you. Similar height, similar build, similar skin tone. Could be me isn't the same as is me. I know that. But the prosecutor doesn't care. They've got a victim who needs justice and a suspect who fits. They're offering a deal plead. Guilty to robbery. Drop the assault charge. You'll do maybe 3 to 5 years with good behavior." I stared at him. "You want me to confess to something I didn't do? I'm telling you what they're offering. If we go to trial and lose, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. That's a long time. I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do." He sighed like he'd heard this before. "Then we go to trial. But I need you to understand the risks." The arraignment lasted 10 minutes. The judge set bail at $75,000. I couldn't afford that. I didn't have $75 in my bank account, let alone $75,000. I was sent to county jail to await trial. I called my girlfriend, Tasha, from the jail phone. She was crying before I even got a full sentence out. "Marcus, what is happening?" "Everyone's saying you robbed a store. My MOM thinks it's not true," I said. "You know me. You know I didn't do this." "I know, baby, I know. But the police, they showed up at my work asking questions. People are looking at me different. My supervisor told me maybe I should take some time off." My chest tightened. "I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I just need you to tell them I was with you that night." There was a pause that lasted too long. "Tasha, I was with you until about 9:30, she said quietly. "But after that, I don't know where you were." "I can't lie to the police, Marcus. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to tell them I was home. But I don't know that for sure." That's when I felt the first crack in my foundation. The first moment of real fear. "Tasha, I need you." "I'm trying," she said, and I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. "I'm trying to believe you. But everyone's saying everyone's wrong. I have to go. I'll try to visit this weekend." She didn't visit that weekend, or the next. 3 weeks later, her sister called to tell me Tasha had moved back to Cincinnati to stay with family. She couldn't handle the pressure. She couldn't handle the questions. She couldn't handle being the girlfriend of a man accused of armed robbery. I was completely alone. It took 9 months for my case to go to trial. 9 months in county jail, waiting. 9 months of watching legal dramas on the common room TV and realizing how little they resembled real life. 9 months of my public defender visiting maybe once a month. Always rushed. Always overworked. Costner had 187 active cases. He told me that one day, like it was something to be proud of. How was he supposed to give my case the attention it needed when he had 186 other clients demanding the same? The trial started on a cold January morning in 2009. The prosecution's case was straightforward and devastating. First, they brought out the store clerk, a man named Dennis Martinez. He was in his 40s, still had a scar on his forehead from where he'd been hit. He pointed at me from the witness stand. "That's him," Martinez said, his voice shaking. "That's the man who robbed me. Are you certain?" the prosecutor asked. 100%. I looked right at his face. I'll never forget it. My lawyer cross-examined him, pointed out that the robbery happened quickly, that Martinez had been traumatized and hit in the head, that memory under stress is unreliable. But Martinez never wavered. He was sure, absolutely sure. Next they played the surveillance footage. It was grainy, shot from a corner-mounted camera, mostly showing the top of someone's head. The person was black, wore a black hoodie, was about my height. You couldn't see the face clearly. You couldn't see any identifying features. But the prosecutor stood in front of the jury and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, that is Marcus Williams on that screen. Look at the height. Look at the build. Look at the clothing. That is the defendant. My lawyer tried to argue that the footage was inconclusive, that dozens of men in Columbus could match that description. But the prosecutor had planted the seed in the jury's minds that grainy figure was me. Then they brought in a detective who testified about the photo lineup. 6 photographs, all of black men roughly my age. Martinez had picked me out without hesitation. What they didn't tell the jury was that I was the only person in that lineup wearing the exact same clothing described by Martinez. The other 5 photos were professional headshots or driver's license photos. Mine was a Facebook photo I'd posted a week earlier, wearing a black hoodie. My lawyer objected. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. The prosecution rested their case. 2 days of testimony, an eyewitness, a video, a photo lineup. In their narrative, I was guilty. Costner called 3 witnesses for my defense. First was my girlfriend, well, ex-girlfriend by that point. Tasha took the stand and testified that I'd been with her until 9:30 p.m. the night of the robbery. But under cross-examination, the prosecutor turned into her. Ms. Patterson, you stated Mr. Williams was with you until approximately 9:30 that evening. Is that correct? Yes. And the robbery occurred at approximately 10 p.m. That's only 30 minutes later. Could Mr. Williams have driven to the store, committed the robbery, and returned home in that time? Tasha hesitated. I guess it's possible. But, so you can't actually provide an alibi for the time of the crime? No, but Marcus wouldn't. Just answer the question, please. You cannot confirm his whereabouts at 10 p.m., correct? Correct. The prosecutor smiled. No further questions. My former boss from the electronics store testified that I was a good employee, reliable. Never had any disciplinary issues. But the prosecutor asked her if good employees sometimes commit crimes. She had to admit they did. Finally, Costner called a forensics expert who testified that the surveillance footage was too poor quality to make a definitive identification. But the prosecution's own expert contradicted him, saying the height and build were consistent with me. That was it. That was my entire defense. 3 witnesses and a hope that reasonable doubt would be enough. It wasn't. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they came back, the foreman wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew. On the count of armed robbery, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of aggravated assault, how do you find? Guilty. I heard someone behind me gasp. It might have been my mother. It might have been me. The judge said sentencing for 3 weeks. Later, they took me back to county jail in handcuffs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The walls were closing in. I'd just been convicted of a crime I didn't commit. Here's something that should terrify you. Eyewitness misidentification is the leading cause of wrongful convictions in the United States. According to the Innocence Project, it plays a role in about 70% of convictions that are later overturned by DNA evidence. 70%. The human memory is not a video recording. It's more like a story we tell ourselves, and that story changes every time we recall it. When someone experiences trauma like being robbed at gunpoint, their memory becomes even less reliable. Stress hormones flood the brain. Details get fuzzy. The mind fills in gaps with assumptions, and cross-racial identifications are particularly unreliable. Studies show that people are significantly worse at recognizing faces of a different race than their own. Dennis Martinez, a Hispanic man, was asked to identify a black suspect. The odds of misidentification were already higher, but juries don't know this. When a victim points at a defendant and says, "That's him, I'm sure," juries believe it. It's compelling. It's emotional. It feels like truth, even when it isn't. At sentencing, the judge gave me 12 years. 12 years for a crime I didn't commit. With good behavior, I'd be eligible for parole in 8. My mother collapsed in the courtroom. I heard her sobbing as they led me away. They transferred me to Riverbend State Prison 3 days later. It's a medium security facility about 90 miles from Columbus. Might as well have been 9,000. My mother didn't drive, and the bus route was expensive and complicated. She visited once every 2 or 3 months. Prison is exactly as bad as you imagine and worse in ways you can't anticipate. The violence, sure, that's real. I saw 3 stabbings in my first year. One guy lost an eye. Another nearly died. You learn to keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with the wrong people. Never show weakness. But it's the boredom that really destroys you. The endless sameness of every day. Wake up at 5:30. Count. Breakfast. Count. Work detail or received yard. Count. Lunch. Count. More work or back to your cell. Count. Dinner. Count. Lights out at 10. Every single day. I worked in the prison laundry for 19 cents an hour, 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, hauling wet sheets and towels the size of parachutes through industrial machines. My hands cracked and bled from the detergent. I made about $4.5 a week. I spent most of that money on phone calls, 21 cents per minute to call my mother. A 10-minute call cost over $2. My weekly wage covered maybe 2 calls home. At night, I'd lie on a thin mattress on a metal bunk and stare at the ceiling. My cellmate, a guy named Yai, serving 6 years for distribution, would talk about his kids, how his oldest daughter was starting middle school and didn't write to him anymore. System don't care if you're guilty or innocent. He'd say, system just need bodies to fill beds. That's how they make money. I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was just bitter. But the more I learned, the more I realized he was right. Private prisons make money per inmate. States sign contracts guaranteeing occupancy rates sometimes 90% or higher. If prison populations drop, taxpayers still have to pay for empty beds. The system is literally designed to keep prisons full. And who fills those beds? Disproportionately black and brown men. Men like me. Men who couldn't afford real lawyers. Men who took plea deals because they were terrified of harsher sentences. Men who were innocent but couldn't prove it. The first year was the hardest. I kept waiting for someone to realize the mistake. I filed motion after motion with Costner, begging him to find new evidence, to appeal, to do something. He filed one appeal. It was denied. After that, he stopped responding to my letters. I watched my life outside disappear piece by piece. My apartment was gone, obviously. My belongings, my furniture, my clothes, my photos were put in storage by my mother, but she couldn't afford the fees. After 6 months, the storage company auctioned everything off. My job was gone. My girlfriend was gone. My friends stopped writing after a few months. To everyone on the outside, I'd become exactly what the system said I was. A criminal, a convict, someone to forget. My mother kept believing in me. She'd visit when she could, always bringing pictures of the family, news from the neighborhood. She'd hold my hand across the table and say, I know you didn't do it, baby. I know, but even she started to look tired, worn down, like the weight of my innocence was too heavy to carry. Years 2 through 5 were a fork. I went through the motions. I worked, I ate, I slept, I avoided trouble. I took classes through the prison education program GED prep, even though I already had my diploma, and some vocational training in HVAC repair. Not because I cared, but because it gave me something to do, something to make the days feel less pointless. I joined the prison law library, spent hours reading case law, trying to understand the system that had swallowed me. I learned about Brady violations, where prosecutors hide evidence that could help the defense. I learned about Batson challenges, about jury selection discrimination. I learned all the ways the system was rigged against people like me, and I kept filing motions. Ineffective assistance of counsel, newly discovered evidence, anything I could think of, they were all denied. My mother's health started to fail around year 4. Diabetes, high blood pressure. The stress of having a son in prison was literally killing her. She couldn't visit as often. When she did, she looked 10 years older than she was. You've got to take care of yourself, Ma, I told her during one visit. I'll take care of myself when you're home, she said. That's when I realized something that broke me. My innocence didn't just destroy my life. It was destroying hers too. By year 5, I'd almost given up. I'd almost accepted that this was my life now. Inmate 847,293. A number. A statistic. One of 40,000 innocent people rotting in cages. And then I met Jasmine Reeves. Jasmine was an investigator with the Ohio Innocence Coalition, a nonprofit that worked to overturn wrongful convictions. She'd taken an interest in my case after reading about it in a database of potentially wrongful convictions. She came to visit me on a Tuesday afternoon in August, year 6 of my sentence. I'd gotten the notice the day before and assumed it was a mistake. I didn't know anyone named Jasmine Reeves. She was in her mid-30s, wore professional clothing, but had the kind of determination in her eyes that told you she didn't give up easily. Marcus Williams, she said, sitting across from me in the visiting room. I've been reviewing your case. I think you were wrongfully convicted. I'd heard those words in my head 1,000 times. Hearing someone else say them out loud made my throat tight. I know I was wrongfully convicted, I said. I've been saying that for 6 years. I believe you, and I think I can prove it. She opened a folder and spread out documents on the table between us. Photos, police reports, court transcripts, The photo lineup used to identify you was improperly conducted, she said. You were the only person wearing clothing that matched the description. That's suggestive identification, which should have been challenged more aggressively. My lawyer barely challenged it at all. I know. I also found something else. The surveillance footage from the store. There's a timestamp on it. It says the robbery occurred at 10:07 p.m., but the police report says you were spotted leaving your apartment building at 10:15 p.m. by a neighbor. I sat up straighter. What? There's a witness statement that was never used at trial. A woman named Carol Henderson who lived in your building. She told police she saw you leaving your apartment at around 10:15 the night of the robbery. The detective noted it, but never followed up because it didn't fit their timeline. If the robbery happened at 10:07, and you were seen at your apartment 8 minutes later, and your apartment is a 20-minute drive from the store, you couldn't have done it. My hands were shaking. Why didn't this come up at trial? Because the prosecution never disclosed it to your defense attorney. It's a Brady violation. They had exculpatory evidence, and they buried it. For the first time in 6 years, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Hope. The legal process, I learned, moves even slower than I thought. Jasmine filed a motion for a new trial based on the newly discovered evidence and the Brady violation. The state fought it. Of course they did. Admitting they'd convicted an innocent man would be a nightmare for them politically. Months passed. Then, a year. Jasmine kept working, kept digging. She tracked down Carol Henderson, who confirmed her statement. She found cell phone records. Mine didn't exist because I had a prepaid phone at the time. But she found records showing no calls from my number near the store at the time of the robbery. She even found something extraordinary. The actual robber. His name was Terrence Booker. He'd been arrested 2 years after my conviction for a string of armed robberies across Columbus. His mo was identical to the robbery I'd been convicted of. Black hoodie. Late night. Convenience stores. Pistol whipping clerks. Jasmine brought this to the prosecutor's office. They dismissed it. Said it was circumstantial. Said Booker robbing other stores didn't prove he robbed the one I was convicted for. So Jasmine went to the media. She contacted local news stations, newspapers, crime podcasts. She told my story to anyone who would listen. Innocent man spends 7 years in prison while real robber walks free. The pressure mounted. Public opinion started to shift. The Ohio Innocence Coalition organized rallies. My case became a cause. And finally, in year 8 of my sentence, a judge agreed to a hearing. The hearing took place over 3 days. I was transported from prison each morning in shackles, still in my prison uniform. I sat at the defense table next to Jasmine and a team of volunteer lawyers who joined my case. They presented everything. The Brady violation, Carol Henderson's testimony, the cell phone records, the pattern of Terrence Booker's crimes. The prosecution fought back hard. They argued that Henderson's memory was unreliable. After 8 years, they argued that the cell phone records were inconclusive. They argued that Booker's crimes, while similar, didn't definitively prove anything about my case. But the most powerful moment came when Jasmine played the original surveillance footage side by side with footage of Terrence Booker from one of his later robberies. The height was exact. The build was exact. Even the way he moved was identical. And then she presented something that made the entire courtroom go silent. Dennis Martinez, the clerk who'd identified me, had also been robbed by Booker in one of his later crimes. Martinez had reported it to police, but never connected it to my case. Jasmine put Martinez on the stand. Mr. Martinez, do you remember being robbed in 2010? Yes. And the man who robbed you in 2010, did he remind you of anyone? Martinez looked down. His voice was barely audible. He reminded me of the man who robbed me in 2008, the man you identified as Marcus Williams. Yes. Is it possible, Mr. Martinez, that the same man robbed you twice, and you mistakenly identified Mr. Williams the first time? There was a long, awful silence. I was sure it was him, Martinez said. I was so sure, but is it possible? You were wrong. Martinez looked at me for the first time since the hearing started. I saw something break in his face. Yes, he whispered. It's possible. 3 weeks later, the judge vacated my conviction. I'd served 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days for a crime I didn't commit. They released me on a Thursday morning. I walked out of Riverbend State Prison with a plastic bag containing $73, a bus ticket, and the clothes I'd been wearing when I was arrested 10 years earlier. They didn't fit anymore. My mother was waiting outside. She'd lost weight. Her hair had gone completely grey. She looked 20 years older than the day I'd been arrested. We hugged for a long time. She kept saying, "I knew it, baby." I knew it. Jasmine was there too, along with a small crowd of supporters from the Innocence Coalition. They cheered when I walked out. Someone had brought a cake. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, free. Instead, I felt hollow. Because here's what they don't tell you about wrongful conviction. Getting out is not the same as getting your life back. The state of Ohio offered me compensation for my wrongful conviction. Under state law, I was entitled to $53,000 per year of wrongful imprisonment. That came to $540,000 for 10 years. It sounds like a lot of money until you realize what it has to replace. 10 years of wages I didn't earn. 10 years of career advancement I didn't get. 10 years of social security contributions I didn't make. 10 years of retirement savings I didn't build. 10 years of life experience I didn't have. And it doesn't account for the intangibles. The relationships destroyed. The trauma. The lost time with my mother, who died of a heart attack 8 months after my release. The fact that I never got to propose to Tasha. Never got married. Never had kids. I was 39 years old when I got out. I'd gone into prison at 29. The world had changed. Smartphones were everywhere. Social media dominated everything. The job market had shifted. The city I grew up in felt foreign. I had no credit history. No recent work experience. A resume with a 10-year gap that I had to explain in every job interview. So, Mr. Williams, I see you have a gap in your employment history from 2008 to 2018. Can you explain that? I was wrongfully convicted of a crime and spent 10 years in prison before my conviction was overturned. You could see it in their faces. The discomfort, the doubt, the mental note being made. Maybe he was wrongfully convicted, or maybe he just got away with it. I applied to 147 jobs in the first 6 months after my release. I got 12 interviews, 1 job offer, working as a night stalker at a grocery store for $11.5 an hour. I took it. The hardest part wasn't the job search or the money or even the last time. It was the PTSD. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd wake up in a panic, thinking I was still in my cell. I'd hear footsteps in my apartment and think it was guards coming for count. I'd smell certain cleaning products and be transported back to the prison laundry. I couldn't be in crowds. Too many people, too much noise, too much unpredictability. I'd have panic attacks in grocery stores and have to leave my cart and walk out. I didn't trust anyone. Every person was a potential threat. Every interaction was a power dynamic I had to navigate. I'd spent 10 years in an environment where showing weakness could get you killed. You don't just turn that off. And the anger. God, the anger. Anger at the police who'd built a case on shaky evidence. Anger at the prosecutor who'd hidden exculpatory evidence. Anger at my public defender who'd been too overworked to fight for me properly. Anger at the jury who believed a flawed eyewitness over reasonable doubt. Anger at a system that cared more about conviction rates than truth. But mostly, anger at myself for not being able to afford a better lawyer, for not fighting harder, for the 10 years I'd lost and could never get back. I started therapy. The state didn't pay for it. That wasn't covered under the compensation law. I paid out of pocket. $120 per session, once a week. My therapist told me I had complex PTSD and severe depression. She prescribed medication. It helped. But it didn't fix anything. Some scars don't heal. Let me tell you about the other people I met through the Innocence Coalition. There was Robert, who'd served 23 years for a murder he didn't commit. He got out at 51 years old. His wife had divorced him. His kids were grown and didn't want a relationship with him. He died alone in a homeless shelter 3 years after his exoneration. There was Keisha, who'd spent 11 years in prison for a crime her boyfriend committed. She got out and couldn't find work. Couldn't get housing. Ended up back on the streets. Last I heard, she'd relapsed and was using again. There was David, who was exonerated after DNA evidence proved his innocence. He received $800,000 in compensation. He gave most of it away to family members who'd supported him during his incarceration. Within 5 years, he was broke. He'd never learned how to manage money because he'd been locked up since he was 19. The average wrongfully convicted person receives about $50,000 per year of wrongful imprisonment, and only in states that have compensation laws. Many states have no compensation laws at all, and even in states that do, the process of getting compensation can take years. And here's something that should enrage you. Prosecutors have qualified immunity, even when they're found to have hidden evidence, to have committed Brady violations, To have knowingly convicted innocent people, they almost never face consequences. No disbarment. No criminal charges. Nothing. The system protects itself. 2 years after my release, I was invited to speak at a conference on criminal justice reform. I almost didn't go. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of people and telling my story terrified me. But Jasmine convinced me. Your story matters, she said. People need to hear it. So I went. I stood at a podium and told my story. I told them about the flawed eyewitness identification, the hidden evidence, the 10 years in a cage, the mother who died believing in my innocence but never seeing me truly free. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then everyone. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me. Some were lawyers. Some were activists. Some were formerly incarcerated people. They told me their stories. They thanked me for having the courage to speak. That's when I realized, this is my purpose now. I started speaking more. At universities. At law schools. At community centers. I joined the board of the Ohio Innocence Coalition. I testified before the state legislature about the need for criminal justice reform. I met with other exonerees. We formed a support group. Once a month, we'd get together and just talk about the nightmares, about the job rejections, about the anger, about surviving. We understood each other in a way no one else could. I also met someone. Her name was Angela. She was a social worker who'd attended one of my talks. She asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes, even though the idea terrified me. We took it slow. She was patient. She understood when I needed space. She didn't push me to talk about things I wasn't ready to discuss. 3 years after my release, she asked me to move in with her. I said yes. Life started to feel less like survival and more like living. In 2021, 5 years after my exoneration, Terence Booker was finally charged with the 2008 robbery that I'd been convicted of. DNA evidence from the scene, which had never been tested during my trial, matched him. The prosecutor's office had no choice but to admit what everyone already knew. They'd convicted the wrong man. I attended Booker's trial. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched him be convicted of the crime I'd spent 10 years in prison for. He got 12 years, the exact same sentence I'd received. After the verdict, a reporter asked me how I felt. I feel nothing, I said. Him going to prison doesn't give me back the time I lost. It doesn't bring back my mother. It doesn't undo the damage. The reporter looked disappointed. I think she wanted me to say I felt vindicated or that justice had been served. But there is no justice in this. There's just a broken system that destroys lives innocent and guilty alike. If you take nothing else from my story, understand this. The American justice system is not designed to find truth. It's designed to process cases, to move bodies through the system as efficiently as possible, to maintain conviction rates that make prosecutors look tough on crime. Innocence is not enough. Being right is not enough. The system doesn't care about your truth if it's inconvenient. And the burden falls heaviest on those who can least afford it. Poor people, black and brown people, people who can't afford high-powered attorneys, people who don't have the resources to fight back. I was lucky. I had an investigator who believed in me. I had evidence that could be found. I had a support system that didn't give up. Most people don't have that. Most people die in prison, innocent and forgotten. So what needs to change? We need to end qualified immunity for prosecutors who hide evidence. We need to properly fund public defender offices so every defendant gets real representation. We need to educate juries about the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. We need to require recording of all interrogations. We need independent review boards for cases with questionable convictions. We need to stop treating criminal justice as a game where prosecutors rack up wins and defendants are pawns. And we need to compensate wrongfully convicted people properly, not just financially, but with housing support, job training, mental health services, and everything else they need to rebuild lives that were stolen from them. It's been 8 years since I walked out of Riverbend State Prison. I'm 47 years old now. I work full-time for the Ohio Innocence Coalition, helping other wrongfully convicted people fight for their freedom. I still have nightmares. I still have moments where I forget I am free and have to remind myself that I can go outside whenever I want, that no one's going to do a count, that I'm not inmate 847,293 anymore. Angela and I got married last year. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and some of my fellow exonerees. Jasmine officiated. I think about my mother every day. I wish she'd lived to see me married. I wish she'd lived to see me build something meaningful from the wreckage of those 10 years. But she didn't. And that's part of what I carry now. I don't have children. I didn't want to bring kids into a world where what happened to me could happen to them. Maybe that's cowardice. Maybe that's trauma. I don't know. What I do know is this. I survived. Against all odds. Against a system designed to break me. I survived. And now I'm using that survival to fight for others. If you're watching this and you're facing wrongful conviction, or you know someone who is, don't give up. Fight. Find organizations like the Innocence Project or your local Innocence Coalition. Document everything. Keep copies of every piece of evidence you can get. And to everyone else, pay attention. This could happen to you. It could happen to someone you love. The system is only as just as we demand it to be. My name is Marcus Williams. I was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for 10 years. They took a decade of my life that I can never get back. But they didn't break me. And I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Thank you for listening to my story.